Welcome, fantasy people. This is the Rookie and Pro podcast,
I am the rookie.
and I am the pro. And together, we're going to be bringing you on an adventure, taking the rookie on an adventure through his first fantasy football season. And then I'm the seasoned veteran of about 20 years playing fantasy football. And
20 years.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, I know it
I
goes
did
by
not realize
really
that that
fast.
did not know it was that long that you've been doing this.
Yeah,
Man,
started like middle of high school. It's
wow.
it's kind of crazy. So I am
Dang.
by no
Okay.
means a pro with the analytics and everything else like that. But I kind of have my own ways of doing things, and it's worked out for me here and there. But I'm definitely not, winning my league every single year. Uh, just having fun with it. So in this episode, what we're going to do is we're going to cover creating a fantasy football league. Going along the way with creating the league, I'm going to cover roster positions and scoring. And we'll just use the default on Yahoo for those that are joining us and listening in. Yahoo's just my preferred application. Just that's what I started on 20 years ago and got used to, and I just like the way it operates, the interface with the application on your phone, everything else. But I know a lot of people out there prefer ESPN, so it's kind of dealer's choice for anybody out there. You can access both of these through a web browser on a computer. They also have applications on your phone and everything. So
Okay.
if whether it's Android or Apple, you can go on. It's going to be Yahoo Fantasy in the Google Play Store or the Apple Marketplace, and then it'll be ESPN Fantasy for again the Google Play Store or Apple Marketplace. So with that, I'm going to go ahead, do a little bit of screen sharing, and we'll run everybody through how to do this.
Is Yahoo and ESPN, are those the only places you can do fantasy?
No, there are so many different places. I know the NFL has one. Man, I would kind of assume ABC might have one, or they used to. I mean, you could literally go on and Google fantasy football, and you'll find um, a bunch of different platforms and everything. Um, because football is just such a big thing, at least in the United States, and fantasy football has really, really grown in popularity over the years and everything. Um, you know, there's so many different places you kind of access it. I feel like between Yahoo and ESPN, those are gonna be your two biggest um, places that you find uh, people playing fantasy football, and so that's why we're going to cover those two.
Okay.
So right now I'm on football.fantasysports.yahoo.com. If you literally go into Google and you type Yahoo Fantasy Football, it'll bring you to something like here. You used to need a Yahoo address and everything, but you don't anymore. Um, I've had Yahoo for so long that I use my Yahoo email address. Um, and we'll kind of mess around with it a little bit, but you will have to be signed in, which I am currently and everything. As you can see, I have my league right here that I run every single year. Um, and if you don't want to create a league and you don't want to, be the one that sets everything up and all that, it's very easy to join. very easy to join. You can hit join now, right? And in previous years, they used to let you join now and draft now. And right now they aren't allowing that. And we might have to wait until later into July, early August for that to come up. But right now you can do a join now, draft later.
Is that draft later because the drafting isn't happening yet quite yet?
So the draft later, yeah, like for me, I prefer to kind of draft the very last week right before the season starts.
Okay.
That's when I try to draft. And the reason because of that is because players will get hurt in training camp. They will get hurt in preseason. And so if you draft and it's, July, right? And you draft and your guy tears his ACL. Well, obviously you have time to kind of go back and try to find somebody to replace him. But if that's one of your higher picks in the draft, and it's a stud player for you and everything, um, like you could have gotten somebody at that spot, so it's personal preference. There's nothing wrong with drafting mid-August before preseason stuff. Other things too is you'll have rookies or other players will kind of start making their name for themselves sometimes and making some noise. And then you're starting to kind of look at trying to draft those guys and you're waiting to see how they actually perform in preseason games um, before you draft them. And so, once again, that's why I kind of go last possible moment. Now, I will normally have multiple leagues that I join, and I like doing the draft now, teams and everything, um, because you kind of get a better idea that way of who people are taking. Um, we can cover mock drafts at a later time, but I feel like when people do mock drafts, like they just do random stuff that they would never do. Uh, when it's actual, like when it means something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so my mock drafts are just actually joining leagues and drafting right away to see and um, see where guys might fall and everything. And then of course by the time I get to my league that I run every year, that draft is nothing like what I've already experienced, but uh, at least it kind of gives you an idea. I like it. I think it's fun because it actually matters. Whereas mock drafts, you can kind of pick where you're going to draft instead of being randomly assigned, and then you can just kind of mess around and it doesn't matter.
So what's going on here on the screen? So I see we've got scoring types and draft
Yep.
types, and I don't
So
know
the
what any of
scoring
this
type. So
means.
we only have head-to-head points. So what, like we talked about previously, um, with being able to kind of go up against everybody in the league all at once. So
Mm-hmm.
that's not an option as far as like the basis for your league. So everything is going to be head to head. That's what H2H is, head to
Oh, is
head.
that like when two fantasy league teams go up against each other?
Right, right.
Okay, that's what
So
that
yeah,
is.
so it's
Okay.
going to be, like it's going to be you versus me or, you versus somebody else, and everybody's going to have their matchup just like in the NFL. Everybody's got their team that they're playing that week and everything.
Okay.
So that's what it is. We'll dive into some of the settings. There might be like a secondary scoring where you can also go up against other all the other teams at the same time, and I'm not really sure how that affects standings and everything else like that. So we'll kind of like explore that together. I will say that one of the things I like the most about Yahoo is they do kind of do things a little bit differently when it comes to scoring to make things a little bit more interesting and help with competitive gameplay and everything. And then
Mm,
so go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask what the draft types are here.
Yeah. So the draft types, you click these little information buttons. These help out a lot. Um, so you can kind of see here um, what the different drafts are. So the standard drafts are going to be your normal snake style drafts. So what I mean by snake style is if you have the number 1 overall pick in the first round, then in round 2, you're going to have the last pick of that round. So let's say, for instance, you're in a 10-team league, right? So first round is picks 1 through 10. So if you're pick number 1, then you're going to go 1 all the way down to 10. And then in round 2, it's going to start with pick 10 and go up to 1. And then round 3 will start with 1 and go back. So it's literally a snake where it just, 1 to 10 and then 10 back to 1. And it kind of just like, you're too young for this, but just like the old snake game on, the candy bar cell phones and everything. Uh,
Yeah, I remember that.
yeah. Okay, so yeah, you do know.
Not
Um,
not quite young enough
yeah,
to
yeah,
not
not
remember that,
quite.
but yeah.
We might have some people that never really got to experience that that fun, and putting it at a super high speed and filling the whole screen with your snake. Um, so that's what the standard draft is. It's a snake style. Um, then you have your salary cap. So that one is definitely interesting. It's different. I wouldn't say it's bad. It is very fun, and there's a different schemes and how you want to go about it, right? So, um, what you're gonna do is you're gonna bid money on players. Now, this isn't like real money. Okay, you're not gonna bid $5 and actually have to pay $5, right? Everybody has a cap. Um, so you might start out with, you know, $300, let's say, right? And that'll be predetermined by your league settings. If you're just joining a league like this, then when you choose that selection for the salary cap draft, you'll join a league, and that league will already have settings, um, customized accordingly. So what you're gonna kind of see with the auction style is what it is. Basically what it's called is an auction style draft. So um, what would happen is, like, the person with the first pick, they pick a player to put up for auction, and everybody bids on it, and the highest bidder wins. But the thing is, you have an entire roster that you have to fill up, right?
So do you have
So
like a whole like a budget basically where you've got like I don't know, let's say I don't know like what's the dollar amount that they use? Is it hundreds, thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions?
usually it's hundreds.
Okay.
Um, just the ones that I've kind of messed around with, because I have done it a couple times, um, and it's super different, because when it's your turn to pick, that doesn't mean you're going to get that player, right?
Right.
So, like, let's say I have the third overall pick and I put up Patrick Mahomes on the auction, right? Well, everybody's going to be bidding on him because he's one of the best quarterbacks, right? So, like, I might not want to, somebody might bid like $60 on him. I might not want to spend $60 because everybody's only got, like, we'll use the $300 example. Everybody's only got $300. And so if you use 60 on one player, if you have 20 total roster spots between your bench players and your starting lineup, you only have $240 for 19 more players, right? and that doesn't mean that don't spend the money. It's just you have to be very picky and choosy of who you go for, right? And how much you're willing to spend. Because if you're spending $150 on 3 players, you have $150 now to fill out 17 more roster spots.
Then you
Um,
have then you have to then you're probably going to get like pretty crappy players because you can only spend
it
very
exactly.
little money. It's like,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
okay.
So, like what I like to do, my strategy personally is in the first couple rounds, I will do the opposite of what I do in the standard style, which is, when we do the standard style draft and everything, um, I will save my kicker and my defense for the last 2 picks of the draft. So I will fill out my entire roster and my whole bench before I go for kicker and defense. And just the reason why I do that personally is because oftentimes I'm going to end up streaming a kicker and a defense throughout the entire season. And what I mean by streaming is every week I might have a new defense. I might just pick up somebody off of the waiver wire. I might pick up a new kicker off the waiver wire every single week based on matchups. Um, and so they don't have as much value. Now, if you're a fantasy player and you're seasoned, you might have the argument that no, there are kickers, there are defenses that you want to get up higher and everything. And I agree. There are kickers. Some are better than others, and some are worth taking a little bit sooner than others and everything. Um, just what I've seen is normally people that have that viewpoint of they want that stud defense or they want that stud kicker and everything. Um, they'll take it higher in the draft when I'm looking to fill out depth pieces on my bench. And so by the time I kind of have those people that I'm looking for, um, you know, the the defenses that I have available or the kickers I have available um, aren't as good. And normally I'm personally not willing to take uh, those 2 positions higher in the draft. And that's just me. Um, anybody can do it however they want. Um, but that's just kind of like how I operate and everything. So when it comes to salary cap, I'll address it the opposite way. So in the first round, I'll choose a kicker or a defense. And what I'll do is, I'll bid up to a certain point. Um, and so like you were mentioning budget earlier, right? So
Mhm.
they do give you a budget and you can go over that budget if you want. It just automatically calculates your average that you can spend per player based on the amount of money that you have left and the roster spots that you need to fill. So what I like to do is I'll sit there and choose a kicker, right? Or I'll choose a defense
Mhm.
and I'll bid up to, whatever I choose to bid up to. I might only bid up to $5, right? And if somebody wants to bid 6 or 7 or whatever, I let them do it, right? Because what that's going to do is that's going to give them less money. And so if they kind of overpay for those positions, they have less money to spend on the big guns.
Hey, it's
Um,
the them problem, right?
yeah, and so I kind of manufacture it like that. Um, and
Are we gonna at all take a look at like both draft styles when we do the video on drafting?
um, I had not planned on it because like we're gonna go with the standard draft type.
Okay.
Um, and cover that. Like if you want to run 2 leagues, we can. Um,
Is it
we can
possible
look in
to
we
look
could look into
at
like the mock
like
drafts and kind of go that route with it. So then you don't have to commit to multiple leagues if you don't want to,
yeah,
right?
if we could at least so I can kind of at least get a sense of what the salary cap like the different draft types look like when you're actually drafting them.
Yeah,
Because while I'm hearing it, it's like, okay, I'm kind of getting it, but um, like
right. And
until I
without
actually get a visual, I won't ever fully
exactly,
understand it until I get a visual.
yeah. And I'm just trying to explain it as best I can without actually like diving into that. Um, yeah, let's put a pin in that for now, and then we can come back on another episode and cover that salary cap and do the mock drafts. Um, and then that'll be kind of a fun way to introduce you and everybody else to the salary cap, um, or the auction style draft is what I'm used to calling it. And then your last one, auto pick. Auto pick is a set it and forget it. Um, if you want to do this, you absolutely can. Personally, I hate it. and and
Because
it's
you have no say
you
in.
have no control, right?
Yeah,
It's whatever Yahoo gives you. And I'm telling you right now, what Yahoo gives you is not fantastic.
probably not.
Um, some people do kind of get lucky. Um, but yeah, auto pick is literally you don't log in at all. You set your draft date and time. So like, for instance, this is, draft date of August 4th at 3:30 Mountain Time, right? And you'll join now if you were on the auto pick, and you'll come back. Oh, I don't know, give it maybe like 4:30 or so, and you'll have a team. And the way that uh, Yahoo chooses their players for you, I really don't have an explanation for. Um,
Random.
it is very random. Like initially, it'll take whoever the highest rated player is at the time, but then there comes a point to where, uh, like let's say the highest rated player is a wide receiver,
Hmm.
and your wide receiver slots are full, and you have an open tight end position. Well, it'll take maybe the highest rated tight end at the time, even though there's another wide receiver that had you been drafting, you probably wish you would have gotten him instead because you could have gotten that tight end you got in the later rounds. And so yeah, it's, I've seen people do it, because I try to get people as much as possible to all join the draft. It just makes it a lot more fun than fighting auto draft. Um, when you have everybody making their own picks versus half of the people making their picks, and then half the people just, you know, uh, Yahoo's doing it for them, or ESPN, because ESPN's got the same stuff. Um, they'll have auto pick as well. Um,
I feel like
oh,
drafting your own team makes it feel a little bit more personal than, and it feels more skill based than random chance.
it definitely is more skill based, yeah, because when you have random chance, all of a sudden, because I've seen this happen where you'll have players that are actually injured, and Yahoo will still draft them because of where they're ranked. And so your starting wide receiver might be injured and might not be coming back, until the middle of the season. And you could have gotten that wide receiver in the 12th round, right? Or maybe the 10th round. And
So do
you
you
drafted him in the
redraft
third. No,
during the season?
no, no. You're stuck with what you got. And then you can add and subtract off the waiver wire. And
Because you're
and we'll
talking
cover
about
that.
like different rounds and whatnot. It sounds like there's
Yeah,
more to
so
drafting.
the round. So in football, right? You
Mhm.
have your first round, your second round, your third round. There's 7 rounds in the NFL draft. Um, so this is very similar, where you're going to have rounds 1 through 20, 1 through 15, 1 through 16, depending on how many roster spots you have, right?
Okay.
Because you're going to have X amount of starting, and then you're going to have X amount of bench players. So I want to
this is
say,
probably good topic to discuss during the drafting episode.
yeah, no, absolutely. Because I want to say there's probably, on average, I want to say the average team size is right around 15 to 16 spots, if I remember right. So yeah, we'll cover that.
Cool.
So kind of moving on, we've kind of covered the draft types and everything. If you want a different day, you just click on it, select it, what day works for you and everything. Right now, I guess, we can go ahead. We could draft here in a few hours, and you click join now, draft later. And then you got these
Ads.
yeah, ads.
All these ads.
And yeah. And so now I've just been added and everything to this. So you got that. Let's see here. I'm trying to figure out, how do I bail?
Get back to the screen you were on.
Well, no, because I'm actually part of it now. There has been in the past. There's been something right around here. It might be on these notes here. There we go. So let's say you accidentally join, right? And you're like, oops, I don't want this. Go to your notes, okay? Right underneath the league name and everything. Go to your notes. Come down. If you wish to leave this league, you can delete this team. And I'm out. So it'll bring you to this. You'll see your different teams and leagues. I'm going to delete this one. It's going to ask you, are you sure? Normally we'd have fun, but no, we're going to go back. So we'll go back. We'll see if it goes. Yep, it goes back. So what we'll do, we'll go back to home. There we go. So let's see here. I'm going to try it a little bit farther out because I know. Okay, so August 24th, let's say 4:30. We'll do 5 o'clock. Hit join now, draft later. Once again, it's going to be the same kind of stuff. So this, what it is it's going to, it's just all the standard scoring. So just how Yahoo's standard scoring is, that's how everything's going to kind of be. We will cover that here in a minute. And go back. Click add a team. And of course, before. Okay, here we go. Yeah. So we can go, there's different game modes, right? So if you want to do public prize leagues, so paid leagues, so there's plenty of people out there that put money down every year, right? I do that in ESPN with one of my buddies who has a league and everything, and they do payouts and everything else like that, buy-ins, what they called. You can do that. You can create yours to be that if you want to. And you have different options. Looks like you're just going to have a 10 team. Okay. This is your competition level. So you can buy in of $5, win up to $25. You can put in as much as $5,000. I do not recommend that unless you got a bunch of money to spend and you're really good at what you do. You know, definitely not going to give you financial advice on here or anything else like that. Everybody's got what they're comfortable with. If you're seasoned and you feel like putting some money in, those are kind of your options. What I do like about Yahoo versus ESPN, as far as I know, Yahoo collects the money and holds the money, and then they are the ones that pay you out. ESPN, at least the way we do it in the league that I'm on with ESPN, we use Venmo, and then the commissioner holds the money, and then the commissioner is responsible for paying out. I like the way that Yahoo does it because Yahoo will not let you draft unless everybody is paid. And then once again, you don't have to worry about not getting paid out because Yahoo's the one that's holding the money and paying you. You'll have two different draft types, the standard and the salary cap. So there is no auto pick. If you don't show up and log into the draft, you will auto pick. So it will auto draft for you if you decide you don't feel like showing up for it and everything. It's just there's no auto draft for the entire league option. And then you have your date that you can pick out and your times. So we will go back to that. And then your custom leagues, you're going to have free and paid leagues. These are created by other people. And that's what my league is. It's a custom league. I have modified the different scoring types to kind of fit what I like. I don't go really crazy. I keep a little bit of the old scoring from how things were when I first started playing, as well as kind of modifying scoring to make certain players a little bit more relevant. And we'll cover that once we get into the creating our league. So you'll kind of see, this will tell you a free $50 buy-in. It'll tell you how many teams are joined. So you can see here you have a 10-team league, a 12-team, a 10, an 8, 6. I think you can go as low as 4. I don't know.
Is there any real difference between the amount of people in a league?
14. Oh, absolutely. There's a big difference. So, like, let's say you do a 6 team, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your playoff formats are automatically going to have 4 people at a minimum. Okay, so that means only 2 people are not going to make it into the playoffs. With 6 teams, that means that there's almost no skill required because with 6 teams, everybody's team is going to be so loaded that it doesn't take any skill or anything else like that to kind of find players that are going to make a difference. Like the more teams you have, the deeper you kind of have to dive into.
Because you got to do more. You have to use more players because all the good players are being spread out among the teams more.
Exactly. So you have to go in. You have to find these, what they call sleepers, guys that aren't well known or breakout players, that kind of deal. 6 and 8 team leagues. it doesn't require a whole lot because your waiver wire is going to be so saturated with good players still. The battle
So
is really just going to be, against yourself of, do I hold this good player or do I drop him for this good player? And try, like, that's the decisions you have to make.
it's
Whereas,
basically playing fantasy on easy mode,
yes,
right? Okay.
yes, that's exactly it. Um, 10 team, I really like 10 team. It's a really good sweet spot. 12 team leagues are not bad. I play in both. The one I manage is a 10 team league.
Mhm.
It just, there's enough good players to go around without having a bunch on the waiver wire just sitting there, and it requires you to kind of dive into um, the depth charts and everything else like that. It requires you to pay attention to football, who's kind of breaking out, who's doing what, and then the 12 team just kind of like adds to that, because with two more teams you're adding, if it's 16 roster spots per team, that's 32 more players. And because you're drafting, that spreads the good players out, and then that means you really got to find other people to kind of add. And the degree of difficulty does go up. Obviously, if you go to like 14, it goes even farther up, right? And so you're trying to find guys that uh, you know might give you 3 or 4 points that week, that might contribute in everything. So that's kind of the gist of this. You can sort right by league types, head to head, points only. That's going to be your custom, and that's where you're going to kind of go where everybody's gonna. It's whoever's on top that week gets first, second, third, in ascending order or descending order. Your draft types right here, and your draft dates, and you'll be able to filter. Some of them they require you to apply. Some of them you can just join. And then the commissioners will have little notes. Um, some will, some won't. You'll have IDP, PPR. So PPR is points per reception. IDP is individual defensive players. PPR, we'll get into that here in the scoring here shortly. It adds value to wide receivers and running backs. Individual defensive players, that's a whole different ballpark that honestly I don't even mess with. I'm not saying don't mess with it. For anybody out there watching, if you're interested in it, you want to mess around with it, go have fun with it. You're gonna draft singular defensive players rather than have entire defense. So instead of drafting the entire Dallas defense and getting points based on how that defense does every single week, you're going to have individual defensive players from different defenses, and you'll get stats according to how those individual players do each and every week, just like how you will with all your offensive players. For me, I looked at that as like, if you're really big into fantasy, you want to really dive into both sides of the ball and everything, I look at it as like an advanced deal. And that's just me. So I'll skip the whole join. Let's see if I can just go back. So now we're going to dive even deeper into it, because we're going to create a league. So we're going to create now. So I'll end up being the commissioner, right? You got copy existing settings. So if you have a setting from an existing or historical league, you can go that route. We're just going to focus on the starting from scratch, as I'm going to run everybody through this. League name, this is where we're going to change it. You can change it later, but I haven't come up with any league names. So, Adam, do you have anything you want to kind of throw in for a league name?
Hmm. Does it have to have the word league in there?
No, it doesn't.
No, it can be anything you
No,
want.
like my league is called Keep Calm and Football On, right? Um, that's why I've had it before. I'm trying to think of other names I've used for different leagues because I did run a second league for a long time. Other league I think I called like the Prestige. Um, literally anything. Don't use swear words. Don't be vulgar about it. Anything.
I'm thinking Rhetorian Fantasy League.
Okay, spell that.
RAT. I always forget how to spell it.
Your friends are gonna see this, when you start this.
RATA. Oh man, I am forgetting how to. I have to write it out to be able to remember how to spell it. Wait.
Rhetorian. You said what? Rhetorian what?
See, I can type it out, but I can't remember how to spell. Ratoran. Yeah, that's how you. That's
Okay,
how you do it.
sweet, cool.
Rhetorian Fantasy League
Fantasy
or Rhetorian Football League, whatever.
League. I'm gonna change that now because now that you said that, I'm gonna call it the. Oh man, not normally I'm good at spelling, but I feel like this is
RAT.
gonna be rhetorical fantasy league. I'm gonna have to spell check that. I swear I messed that up, and I feel terrible because. Yep, there's an H. I knew there was an H somewhere.
Mm.
All right, rhetorical fantasy league. How about that? That's immediately what I thought. You said rhetorian, and then I'm like, oh, we're gonna use rhetorical. We can change it later. Not a big deal.
Alrighty.
Just had to put you on the spot. So, yeah, we'll do head-to-head points. You're gonna compete against a different team each week, and you will have a win, loss, or tie. The way we will do it is use fractional points. And yes, you can still tie with fractional points. I've done it several times. It's a very uncommon thing, but it does happen on occasion. When it does happen, like if it happens to you, you kind of hate it because you're kind of in that like middle ground where because it doesn't count as a loss, it doesn't hurt you, but it doesn't help you as much as a win. But you kind of have to respect it because when you tie with fractional points, I mean that's something hard to do. Season points, stats equal points. You're going to compete with other teams in your league to finish with the most points over the entire season. So, basically, you're going to be first, second, third, etc., based on the aggregate points over the season. The way this is kind of different is so, like in the head-to-head, like let's say you have a really big week that week and you win your matchup and everything, and then the next 3 weeks your team does really really bad and you lose, or your team does really good but the other team just does a tiny bit better, right? And so you're losing games and you might be 1-3 by week 4, the end of week 4, but you might be the highest scoring team in the league by the end of 4 weeks. So you kind of get that luck, I guess. You can kind of get dealt a bad hand where week by week, you get screwed over a little bit because the other team just, manages to nudge you out, but then you still have, aggregate scoring. You're the highest team in the league. That's where, season points is like you wouldn't really care about week to week matchups. It's just about the finish line, so um,
Okay.
it doesn't matter what you're, about wins and losses versus other teams. It's just how many teams can you rack up by the end of the year.
And it
I've
looks
never
like
played it that way. Yeah, go
most
ahead.
people do the head to head.
Yes. Yeah. That's the
They're
most
like the most
popular.
popular.
Yes. That's how it's kind of been ran. So we're gonna hit next. We'll be doing the live standard draft once again. That's the most popular. We covered the snake style draft. Okay. So draft settings. And we're definitely going to be changing this down here, but we'll get in. It says don't stress. You can change your league settings later down at the bottom. Not a big deal. If you want to make it the private prize league, all you got to do is check this guy right here, right? Get this little notification. So if you are in Arizona, Connecticut, Hawaii, Idaho, Iowa, Louisiana, Missouri, Montana, Nevada, Washington, Michigan, Quebec, and Ontario, you are not eligible to participate in private prize leagues. So, unfortunately, for all those people out there that would be listening or watching, if you lived in those areas, you are unable to participate in the prize leagues. For us, not a big deal. You can set your fees. Here's teams from 4 to 20 teams. Have your prize total. And then you can adjust how your payouts are. So you have first place, second place, third place. Typically, third place is going to get their buy-in back. Is kind of how it works. So you'd look at if you get third, if you get bronze, you at least get your money back, right? If you get second place, you kind of get a good chunk more. And then first place, of course, should get the most because you are the king of the castle. If you wanted to do a fourth and a fifth, you can. If you wanted to do separate money for whoever has the most points or the best record. So, like, let's say you had the most points, but you got sixth place that year or whatever, you'd get a payout. Let's say you had the best record, but you lost in the first round of the playoffs, or you even lost in the championship game. Um, you know, you'd still get some money. If you won, you'd still get some money. If you won the whole league, you'd probably kind of double up pay wise. So that is how that works. We're not going to do that. We're just going to do a fun free league, creating league. Alrighty. So gives you that here. Alright, so we need 4 teams required to draft. Down here, 1 of 10 spots filled. We do have our notes here. If you ended up doing it and you wanted, if you're the commissioner, you want to delete it completely, you can delete it completely. You are able to add a logo. Okay. And you can do custom image here, uploading it. Auto renew, it'll auto renew every year when the game opens next season. Invite permissions, you can change this between commissioner to all managers. All managers is just everybody that has been invited, which I'll change that now. Maximum teams in league, so you can change this now. So anywhere between 4 and 20, we're going to leave it at 10. Types of scoring, you can change it here. You want to change, when you want the league, you can change it there. So, so there's 18 weeks. And if you're following football and you're like, well, hey, there's only 17 games. Well, yeah, because everybody has one bye week situated in there, so every team plays 17 weeks. Fantasy football, you get 18. Personally, I try to have the championship week be done at week 17, and that's because by week 18, you'll start seeing the top teams. If they're locked into their playoff spots, they start sitting players and they start sitting starters. And next thing you know, you're going into the championship week and half your team isn't even starting. And now you're trying to put together a team, in the most important week of fantasy football. And it's not fun. I've done that once or twice, and you can definitely feel screwed at the end of the day. Your can't cut list provider.
What is that?
So, as they describe it, is a number of the best players in the game will be on this list throughout the season. If the players on the list, you cannot cut them. You cannot drop them. You can't. So basically, you either can't cut them outright or you cannot drop them for another player off the waiver wire. So they are on your list. They would be on your team no matter what. So
Okay.
even if they have a season-ending injury week 1, you won't be able to drop them. You'll have to put them in an IR spot and leave them there for the season. They do update it when necessary. I guess the idea is it prevents managers at the end of the year from just cutting all their good players and letting other people pick them up and everything for the playoffs. Personally, I don't run with it. We can run with it if you want. I'll leave that up to you.
So, what are the other drop-down options there? It
Well, we'll
shows.
keep going with them. I want to fill these out as we go,
Okay.
if that works for you.
Yeah.
Do you want to go with the can't cut list? Or you want to go with no?
I don't know. If you typically don't, then probably not.
Okay,
Probably
so
go with nothing.
we'll go none. We'll leave it as it is.
Okay.
So maximum player acquisitions for an entire season. I don't do any maximum. What this is this would add an element of you can't just like add drop people a bunch throughout the season and everything. That's what that is. I've had to institute this on a weekly basis for my hockey league because just daily we'd have a bunch of people cycling people. So on a daily basis you'd have people add dropping 3 to 5 players, and in hockey that's to get more games, try to get more points. In fantasy football, the maximum player acquisitions would be so then it would be to force you to kind of stick with your team and only add and drop players under necessary environments, because like let's say you do 20 acquisitions for the entire season. Well, that's basically only one ad drop every single week, with a couple bonus in there. If you're playing 17, if your league is ending at week 17 and everything, that's literally only one ad drop with 3. So if you have 3 players get hurt 1 week and now you gotta swap guys out, you can get put in a bind. I don't play with it. I haven't really seen a reason to get into it like that. That might be for the people that are a lot more into it, trying to make things harder for themselves. as a challenge and everything. For me, I'm just going to leave it. Same thing with trades for entire season. In my experience, it's hard to get people to trade with you, to be honest. Why? There's a whole bunch of different reasons why. Last date to trade player. So this would be your trade deadline. November 16th. You can have no trade deadline, or you can run November 2nd, which I would believe is probably right around when the NFL trade deadline will be this year. Or you could push it later. I'm just going to leave it where it's at. Like I said, normally it's hard to get people to kind of trade with you. A lot of people kind of like to hold on to their players. It seems, at least my perception is that, not as many people are willing to shake up their roster, especially if they're doing bad, to try to see if they can inject some new life into their team and everything. Allow draft pick trades in my league. I do. I allow it, but I haven't actually had a trade that included draft picks. This is gonna be like if you're bringing back your league every single year, which if you're creating your own league, you should be. It makes things interesting. If you have a good team and you're like one piece away or something like that, you can include draft picks for the next season with your players. So maybe you're kind of giving a guy that isn't as high caliber as the one you're trying to get, but then you're like, hey, I'll give you next year's third round pick or next year's first round pick or something. I haven't had anybody accept any trades that I've offered like that, but I like to leave it out there, hoping that maybe someday we'll have people that kind of start thinking like that. Trades reviewed by votes. So you have, when a trade gets accepted, you have people that you can vote on it. So like let's say Patrick Mahomes, somebody's like, oh yeah, well, I'll trade you Patrick Mahomes for a kicker, right? And people are like, well, that's kind of unfair, right? Like, you're just trying to hook your buddy up, one way or another. And so then you have votes with league managers, and people can veto it or they can allow it. The downside to this is, and I see this happen all the time in the ESPN league, if people don't want you to get a better player, right? So even if your trade is fair, but they don't want your team to get better, they'll veto it. Is basically like out of spite. So for me personally, I do commissioner. As the commissioner, the way I look at trades is, as long as it's fair, I'm gonna let it go. If two consenting people can make that trade and agree to it, and it's not extremely one-sided, right? Then I'm gonna let it go, right? Like, that's how the NFL handles it. They don't sit there and be like, oh no, we're not gonna let this trade go through because then this team would be better and we don't want them to be better. Like, we can't let them get any better than they're already at. So like, I hate the whole declining out of, vetoing out of spite kind of deal. Like, oh, well, we don't want to see this team get better because they're already pretty good and they're not trading, with me or something, or offering me a deal I like or whatever. So we're going to do commissioner. Time to protest pending trades. You got 2 days. I'm just going to leave it how it is. You can have it shorter or longer. The time would really go with, if you're doing a veto deal, then that would give everybody between 1 and 7 days to vote on it. I feel like that's kind of self-explanatory. Time players are on waivers. So these are all Yahoo default settings. Okay. They set it at 2 days. On my league, I don't have waivers. I don't have a time. I put no waivers. And what that does is like when a player starts playing a game, right? So uh here Mountain Time, first game started at 11 a.m. It's going to be noon Central Time, 1 p.m. Eastern. And Pacific, going to be 10 a.m. Depending on where you're at, you have to adjust for your time zone accordingly. But if your player starts playing at the noon Central Time, right, then what's going to happen is that player will get locked. And if you have waivers, then you can submit a claim to get that player, but you're going to have to wait until Wednesday in order for that player to get onto your roster. And what that does is it allows people to also submit waivers for those players. And depending on where they're at on the waiver wire, 1 through 10, number 1 gets first priority. So their first waiver that they have, they get that player. Then if they go, and then goes to, waiver number 2. And if their first waiver is the same as the first person and that player isn't available anymore, well, they don't get that player. And then they got to go to their second waiver option if they have one set. The reason why I don't do waivers is if you are actively watching football on Sundays and you see a player going off and that player's having a career game and everything, and you're like, I want to get this guy, right? You can go pick him up right then and there. You can add drop. Now, you're not going to be able to add drop from any of your players that are locked on your starting roster, but you can drop players that are on your bench. And so the reason why I do that is I feel like if you're watching the game and you're being active with fantasy football, then this adds a degree of difficulty because anybody could pick up anyone at any time. Rather than you not paying attention to Sunday games and you're out doing whatever, grocery shopping and whatnot, and then, you come back home, for the evening game or whatever else, and you're just looking at stats and how players are doing. And you're like, oh, well, I want to pick up this player, and you put it in, and you got a higher waiver priority than the person that put in for it but was watching the games. And then you end up getting the player because you just had a higher priority, even though you weren't paying attention to the games and everything else like that. So it's just in my mind, the way I perceive it and everything, it's a reward for, actively engaging with football on a weekly basis and being, paying attention and stuff. So the time players are on waivers and everything. I just like to do no waivers just as a reward for actively participating. For anybody that's like, well, I'm busy on Sundays or, whatever else and everything. I mean, there's, like I said, you can get the apps on the app stores. And you got the NFL app, you can track your games. So while, you know, if you're really into it and everything, you have all that information available on your phone to kind of see who's doing what and stuff. So you can still participate in everything because I'm busy on Sundays too, and so I kind of get it, but I still try to stay actively engaged with it. And some people are fine with they just kind of get to it when they get to it, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. Some things are kind of more important or whatever. And if you're just casually playing, um, it is what it is, right? So uh, definitely not trying to shame anybody based on how they want to play and everything else like that. It's all up to you. The biggest thing is just have fun and enjoy it, right? Like it's just fantasy. It's not real. Even if you're playing for money, like you're still playing for fun at the end of the day. Um, so with that said, do you want to do the waiver wire or do you want to do no for waivers?
Let's probably do no waivers.
Okay. I feel like it just makes it competitive. I mean, there's people where like I'll get in my own head and I'm like, oh, I want to add this person, and then, um, you have to be careful because you add one person and they do really good that week, and then they don't do anything the rest of the year, and like you can still drop them the next week and everything, but you might add them and start them, and then they don't do well for you, and somebody else does well, and then you're just dropping players left and right and swapping everybody. And so like I've definitely noticed that I'll start being a little bit more hesitant about just kind of like reacting in the moment and trying to get it. But then I'll see other people beat me to the punch on getting players, and then that player actually works out, and I'm like, oh man, like I missed it, So I think it makes it a little more competitive. It's fun. Determine waiver priority. This is going to apply if we ran waivers. Continuing rolling list. This is the most common. You have reverse order of standings, so that one would be, the worst team should have number one priority, and then the best team would be at the bottom of the waiver list. Your weekly rolling list would be based on standings and be continually rolling through. So if you're at one week, then you'll be at I'll remember if it goes 1 to 10, and then I think it moves up that way.
Let's do it. The worst team gets the first pick.
Well, it doesn't matter because there's no waivers.
First performing. Oh, okay.
Yep.
Makes sense.
So it only matters if there are waivers. But because there's not, anybody can get anything at any time kind of deal.
It's basically first come, first serve.
Yes, that's exactly it. Waiver rule. So do. So game time Tuesday. Okay. So this is when it like players will become available.
By the way, I can't see the drop down lists whenever you click on the drop downs.
Like it's not popping up?
Yeah, that doesn't share it.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's good to know. Unfortunately, I don't know how to fix that.
I don't think you can.
Okay.
So.
All right. I'm going to gloss over that. Add injured players directly to an injury spot. Yes, I believe this is a new function. I don't recall this being in the options last year. This is actually really cool. So what would happen is, by the time teams reset, which should happen on Tuesday, you should see your players. If a player got injured on Sunday, right, and they're going to be out for a little bit or whatever, then you'd see your player get put into the injury slot. Directly into an IR. Okay, yeah.
What is the IRDL ILNA spots?
So IR is going to be injured reserve for the NFL. Okay. DL, So with baseball, I don't remember if baseball has DL or IL because at some point they switched it. I want to say it's the DL now. It used to be IL because IL's for injured list. DL, honestly, I don't really know what DL stands for.
So they're
Um,
basically all other
so that
ways of saying injuries
yeah,
list. Okay.
right. But this is them covering all sports. So it's not
Okay.
directly just IR. It's gonna, it's covering the other ones. NA roster spots are just gonna be like um, similar to like a bench. Um, yes. So adding injury, I'm gonna leave it at yes. I think that's awesome. Your live pick draft time, so 1 minute. I'm gonna leave it at that. You can go all the way up to 2 minutes. That makes the draft. It drags the draft out, man. Um, 15, 30, 45 seconds. That's really quick to try to be picking. Um, I'm just gonna leave it with 1 minute. It helps the draft kind of go a little bit quicker without having too much time. Um, but not so quick that you're just like randomly grabbing people. After draft, make all unrostered players follow the waiver rules, so there's no waivers. So after the draft, you can add and drop anybody you want at any time. Um, let's see. Yeah, apply injured status for postponed games. We're gonna hit yes. Lock bench players after games start. No. And so this is the big thing. So this
Is
is
that so?
what
Is
was
that
that?
like if a game starts and there's players that are on the bench,
Yep.
if they I was thinking if I was thinking of like they were benched in like the actual physical game, but now I'm not
No, this is
entirely
this is going to be based on um based on your bench. So
okay.
your players that are not in your starting lineup are on your bench. If
Mm-hmm.
you lock them after the game starts, so like let's say that you have a couple players on your bench that start at 11, the 11 a.m. Mountain Time game, so 12 Central. Um, if you lock those players, that means you cannot make those players as part of a transaction to drop in the middle of a game to pick somebody off the waiver wire, is what that
Okay.
means. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're definitely gonna make no make league publicly viewable. All this is um, basically you could see message board posts as far as like anybody could kind of see it and access it. Um, you could find it on Google or whatever. It's I don't know. It's not a big deal. I don't see a reason really to make it. We're just gonna leave it at no. Um, right here, upgrade to Commissioner Plus. If you click this is something that Yahoo has rolled out. Um, I haven't messed with it on ESPN to see if they offer something similar. Um, so there's two subscription bases. Yahoo Fantasy has the Commissioner Plus, which you can see. You can play against a league median score. You can play against a second opponent. So that would be like you and I having a head to head, and then I'm also having a head to head against another person in the league.
Okay.
17 playoffs. That would be something similar to how the NFL currently does it, where the AFC and the NFC have 7 teams each that go into the playoffs. The number one seed has a bye week. The other 6 teams play in wild card weekend now, and then you kind of move on from there. So if you wanted to format it, you could do that. You can customize your position eligibility. So uh, occasionally you'll see these players that are not well-known players, or like they're not necessarily starters and stuff. The most recent one is going to be like Taysom Hill for the New Orleans Saints, where he's kind of like a gadget player, right? So he joined the team as a quarterback. He was just a backup quarterback on the depth chart, but they kind of used him as a gadget guy, and they'd use him as like a tight end and a wide receiver and a running back and stuff, um, to the point where he's actually kind of become more of a tight end now than anything else, because he's still not a starting quarterback or anything. And so in those cases, you'll see eligibility for like the quarterback and tight end position, so you could play him at either one. The advantage to that is like if you have a starting quarterback and say Taysom Hill was the starting quarterback for whatever week and everything, and you thought he was going to do, you could technically play him in the tight end spot, almost as if he was an extra, like as if you were playing two quarterbacks.
Mhm.
It's a very rare thing that you ever see. It's usually players that don't have a set position. For me, the most notable one is years and years and years ago, Marquise Colston, also with the New Orleans Saints. When he first started, I want to say like his rookie year, he was listed as a wide receiver slash tight end, because he wasn't slotted specifically into one position, but he primarily played wide receiver, and so it was a big bonus, and I ended up happening to have him on my team that year, and so I could play him as a wide receiver in my tight end spot, and that gave me a big advantage. Um, I don't really see the use for custom position eligibility, to be honest with you. I don't. I don't use. I'm not subscribed to the $25 fee. That's going to be for 1 year or single league for the current season. So, is fine print. Definitely want to read it. If you're the commissioner of multiple leagues, you need to purchase it for each league. So, if you're a commissioner for 4 leagues, you're going to spend $100 to do this in all 4 leagues. I don't think it's worth it. I'm not gonna do it. I don't do it in my other league. But I want to just touch on that. There still is the Yahoo Fantasy Plus that you can use, and that's different than the Commissioner Plus. That's anybody can use it at all. I do use it for football. It hasn't been as useful as it has been for hockey. Hockey, it pays for itself. And we could probably touch on that later, but we're going to kind of move on. Playoff weeks. So this is what I was kind of talking about. So you have 4 teams. You have 16 and 17. So 16 is going to be your semifinals. 17 is going to be your championship weekend. And then week 18 of the actual NFL season, you're not going to have anything going on, but that protects you from being able to, kind of get a bad lot in week 18. You can change this. You can have 4 teams and have your playoffs be week 15 and 16. You can have 4 teams and have your playoffs be 17 and 18. And then you can expand to 6 teams and run 3 different combinations. You can do 8 teams for the playoffs and run 3 different combinations. I'm just going to leave it
So,
at 4 teams.
with the week 16, 17, or 17 and 18,
Yes.
why would you have your playoffs like 1 week early or 1 week later?
So what I was kind of explaining was if that 1 week difference, so like week 16 and 17, right? The way it's
Mhm.
set right now. that means that your championship week is going to be 1 week before the end of the actual NFL season. Okay? If you do 17 and 18, so you start 1 week later, the bonus is that gives you one more week to try to adjust your standings to maybe get into the playoffs, maybe get a playoff spot.
Mhm.
But on the flip side of that, week 18, if, say the Eagles are locked into the number 1 overall spot, and they're like, okay, well, we don't have any reason to play our starters week 18 because we don't want our starters to risk getting hurt. So we're going to sit all our good starters that would normally give you fantasy points. And let's say you have the quarterback, right? Jalen Hurts. Let's say you have him and they're not playing him. Well, now you have to go to the waiver wire and try to pick up some quarterback that you'll be lucky if he gives you half the points that Hurts would normally give you, right?
Okay.
And that's
So
how you got
sometimes,
to the playoffs, is on the backs of
right.
your star players. And your star players are sitting now, and now you have to go to the waiver wire. But, let's say the person you're playing off against in the championship is playing against Kansas City, and Kansas City's still fighting for a playoff spot, or they could get better seeding in week 18. And so Patrick
Mhm.
Mahomes is playing. Well, now you got, you know, some second, third tier quarterback that is your starting quarterback going against one of the best quarterbacks in football on a fantasy level. That's such an uneven matchup. And that could be the difference between you winning and losing that year, even if you had a fantastic team.
So the 16, 17 is probably going to be the better.
That's how I do it. Yep, you cut
Okay.
out 1 week early before the end of the season. I actually saw this happen in my hockey league this year, because the hockey league I've ran all the way till the end of the season. And then I saw the NHL start doing the exact same thing the NFL does. And the first time I've ever seen it in NHL, where they just, teams started sitting guys, they were locked into their seeds in the playoffs, and they just started playing bench guys, and their stars got, started, and that really messed with things with the championship game, and it made it interesting for sure. But this way, you're maximizing your regular season and being able to find a playoff spot while also maximizing your ability to win a championship at the end of the season, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm doing 4 teams with 10 teams. Yeah, the top 40% makes it in instead of the top 60%. We could do 6 teams if we wanted to. It'd be kind of interesting. Playoff tiebreaker, you got higher seed wins. Playoff reseeding and locking eliminating teams. So we'll allow reseeding, and we'll just hit this little information thing. Does this pop up when I scroll over the information? Can
Yeah,
you see that?
I
Okay.
can see that. Yeah.
So yeah, so if your league uses 3-week playoff seeding, so um, basically what it allows for is it'll adjust the next round of matchups where the highest seeded team will play the lowest ranked team. So um, basically, so with 3 weeks, this makes sense. So with the 2-week playoffs, like we have it currently set up, there's not going to be reseeding because it's the 2 winners of the matchup are going to the championship. End of story. But if
Mm-hmm.
you're doing 6 teams, let's say the 1 seed gets upset by the 6 seed, right? So then what'll happen is, like, if the 2 seed wins their matchup, well, the 2 seed will now play the 6 seed instead of the 6 seed being locked in and playing, um, you know, I'm trying to think of how to explain this because I feel like the NHL does this now where, like, once you're locked into a bracket, you just run that bracket rather than the highest seed playing the lowest seed, and it constantly adjusting based on upsets and everything. So not applicable because we're not doing 3 weeks of playoffs. But I definitely recommend it if you are. Locking eliminated teams. What that is teams eliminated from the playoffs and consolation games. So in a 10-team league, you're going to have 4 teams that make it to the playoffs. So 1 through 4 will be in the playoffs, and then you'll have 5 through 8 will be in a consolation bracket, and then 9 and 10 are just done. They're out. You did so bad, you're not playing anymore. You're going to call it a season. So what locking eliminated teams, it's going to prevent the teams that are eliminated from playoffs and consolation from adding and dropping players during the playoff week. So basically, your 9 and 10 seed that aren't doing anything anymore, they can't add players to try to keep them from the roster of, other people. And they can't drop players, like they can't just drop all their stud players and everything so anybody can pick them up. That's what you would lock them for. I leave it no because I haven't come across any leagues where people do that. If you're eliminated, people just stop paying attention, stop interacting with it. They're done. Normally, if you're like the 9 or 10 seed, you probably haven't really interacted or played much at all. That's just from my experience. Playing the public leagues that you can join, normally the people at the bottom of the standings barely get on. They barely add people. They barely change lineups. You'll play against them 1 week and half their team will be on a bye, and they'll have injured players in their starting lineups. I don't know what's going on. Maximum player acquisitions per week, no maximum. Like I had mentioned earlier with the yearly one, I had to institute this with my hockey league, but I haven't seen a reason to do it with football. There's been no abuse or anything to kind of do that. You could do it if you wanted to kind of make it harder for everybody and regulate things. Divisions, I'm going to say no. I used to play with divisions just because I liked it. Does give that kind of NFL feel to it, right? Because you have your division winners make the playoffs. However, I decided to quit using that this year on my league just because last year we had a division winner that made it to the playoffs, and then there was another team that was just buried in the opposite division that was a better team that should have made the playoffs but didn't, because with divisions you have the division winners automatically go. So it's kind of similar in the sense of like the NFL, you'll see it. You'll see teams with like a losing record occasionally win their division because their division is so bad, and they'll make it in the playoffs. And then there's teams that were 10-6 or 11-6 now that they're 17 game seasons, that were left out of the playoffs because they were in a different division or different conference, and they weren't able to get a wild card spot or something, and they deserved it. So for that reason, I'm out on divisions. The median score and the second opponent, little plus sign, that's if you pay for it and everything. We're not doing that. We're going to go ahead and submit. So that was just that there with the entry level settings. And anybody that's kind of with us still, I'm sorry that this is getting so long-winded. Stick with us. I'm trying to give as much of an in-depth, detailed about all these settings. And we're going to do this with roster positions and scoring as well, to kind of get you know, get Adam up to speed on how this works. And when we go into ESPN, it'll be a little bit quicker because a lot of things are very, very similar. But we're going to move on. You can go up to the Commissioner tab. I clicked on that. Of course, promoting the Commissioner Plus thing. Now you have all your league settings. So this is everything we just went over. The edit league settings is what we did with registration. Sending invites. This is how you'll invite people to the league and everything. You can assign commissioner access here, so I can add a co-commissioner, and that person will be able to edit settings as well. I can edit a note for the entire league. Publishing your league. This is what you use to get the league filled up. So if you want to create a league, and let's say you only got 5 friends, so you got you and 5 people, you got 6 out of 10 teams, you need 4 other people. You don't want to go on to a Facebook group, or something like that and just add random, you don't want to go and ask for people to join or whatever. All you have to do is you hit publish league. It'll add your league to the custom leagues that we went through earlier when you could join and everything, and you'll get people that'll join. And then sometimes they participate, sometimes they don't. As you kind of go through, you weed out the people that aren't active and you try to replace them with other people. Maybe you meet people that are into fantasy football you didn't know that were into fantasy football before. If you decided you wanted to convert it to a private prize league after being a free league for, years, or let's say you were like, no, I'm going to make a free league, and then you have a bunch of your friends together and everybody's like, no, let's do a paid league. You can do it now. So it's not a big deal. Emailing league, you can send an email to everybody or just specific teams that you need. This is where you would delete your league below. And then some of these, like editing player waiver dates, that's only post draft. Editing league history, not really available since it's a brand new league. You don't have history there. Well, that's just completely completely fire hose feeding you right now.
Yeah, so much information coming in.
How are you feeling? Because
Overwhelmed.
that's just I get it. And I'm trying to impart, oh man, I'll say 12 years of knowledge on you, because that's how long, I've had my other league for, being commissioner and everything. Most other times I just joined and everything. So just everything I've learned over the years, yeah, I just opened up that fire hose on you and
Yeah, it's almost
sprayed you
2
down.
hours
So
of just straight
right,
shot learning and just like, okay, alrighty. I'm not entirely sure how to fit everything in, but this can be useful information as we go on.
yeah,
Sometimes you just gotta slot in information. It's like, okay, you don't know how to use this yet, but we're gonna
right,
learn as we get into the other sections as we do other videos. So
yeah. Well, and the great thing is this will be there for everybody else to kind of go back and look at and pause and whatever you need to kind of go over that information over and over again. There's nothing wrong with that at all. So just let it soak in, and we'll dive back into the next steps. Because it did take so long. Yeah, with that, thanks for joining and everything and trying to take all that information in.